All right, we're going to call to order our special meeting for Plymouth Township Council for October 25th, 2023. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I want to thank everybody for coming. I hope everybody can hear me. I'll try to speak as loud as I can. I see one of my students, Kenneth, back there, so I'll use my teacher voice for him. I want to just first take a minute to introduce everybody here so that those in the audience know who they're hearing from and who they're looking at. I'll start over on this side with three of our council members, Kathy Bandish, who represents the 4th Ward of Plymouth Township, Karen Bramblett, who is our council person at large, Lynn Vicio, who represents the 3rd Ward of Plymouth, which is the ward in which the mall property sits, Nick Whitney over here in the red shirt, who represents the 1st Ward. I represent Ward 2. I am Chris Monero. I'm the chair of Plymouth Council. Karen Bramblett is our vice chair. Also seated at the table are Alex Glassman and Mike Clark from our solicitor's office, Rudolph Clark LLC, and our township manager, Karen Weiss. I'll introduce our presenters when I'm done my introductory remarks. We do want to thank everybody for coming. It's a good turnout. We were hoping to get a lot of people here tonight. As we know, the Plymouth Meeting Mall has been a kind of a cornerstone of the township, a center of our commercial retail business for many years. But like many places around the country and in the area, we're seeing sort of a changing nature of retail, a changing nature of our commercial landscape. And we know the mall's faced a lot of challenges and has attempted to go under a lot of changes. And we've also seen, I think, a lot of success at the mall property with the transformation of different spaces, certainly the former Macy's and how that's been transferred into everything from Miller's Ale House to a Michael's to Dick's Sporting Goods to a gym, the addition of Whole Foods, the many bustling restaurants that we see surrounding the mall area, and really turning this mall into very much of a mixed use type of area where you can certainly go to church, a place where you can worship, a place where you can shop, a place where you can buy your groceries, and what we're really kind of here to see tonight and take the next conversation to that level of what else can we envision in that property. Many malls around the country have become what they call dead malls. There's great YouTube videos, by the way, if you're ever interested, of people walking through quote-unquote dead malls. I personally think that with some of the innovation and the changes at the Plymouth Meeting Mall, we've avoided that by certainly adding a lot of new things. But we know there are challenges with the interior of the mall and with the property as a whole. So one of the things, of course, that's been part of that conversation where we have worked with Preet extensively is the conversation of residential and to what extent whether or not residential components from the ground up would be a part of what we can envision in the mall. The other part of the conversation is maybe thinking of this less as a mall, and maybe the word mall becoming something that maybe it really isn't anymore. So we really want to give tonight a chance for our residents to hear from Preet, which stands for the Pennsylvania Real Estate Investment Trust. They're the largest owner. They don't own every piece of the mall, but they own much of the property. And what some of their vision is for the future, what some of their hopes are, and what some of the goals are that they have for that property. In terms of the format for tonight, we really want tonight to be very informational. But as we've met with Preet many times over the years, they certainly always hear from us. But what we bring to them and what we discuss with them is typically what we hear from our residents. So we thought tonight would be a really good opportunity for you to hear directly from them and for them to some extent to hear directly from you. So over there along the wall by the windows, I do have some index cards there. So at any point, if you want to get up, if you have a question, if you want to sort of get up while I'm talking, grab some. There's a pile of white index cards for residents, and there's a pile of multicolored index cards for any non-residents. If you have any questions or just any general comments, we're going to ask you to write those down. At the end of the presentation, we'll come around and we'll collect any questions and we'll read them and get some answers and some feedback. It's possible you may have questions for us on council. It's possible you may have questions for our presenters or simply maybe just a comment. So we'll try to keep things orderly and moving, so we'll do it that way. And then our goal here, and we really would like to keep this, keep everybody's time in mind, very valuable. We've all been up late nights watching our beloved Phillies. So sad. But we would like to try to wrap the meeting up no later than 8:30, so we want to try to keep on that time schedule so everybody can go home and get a good night's sleep. So what I'd like to do first is introduce our presenters who are here from PREIT, who are going to share sort of their plans and their ideas and what the vision could possibly be for the future of the mall property. We have Chris Merzinski on the right, and we have Seth Shapiro to his right, and I'm going to allow them to come up and sort of take over from here.
Thank you, Councilman. I appreciate that. I don't think I could have asked for a better setup, so I definitely appreciate that. Sure. As it blow up. Sorry. Just make it the full screen.
Yeah, I'm going to get the presentation. Just got the slide.
So again, I want to thank everybody who came out tonight. I want to thank the members of council for being here. And Councilman Monero, I want to thank you for facilitating this evening. With me tonight, besides Seth, I've got Joe Cordino, who's the CEO and chairman of Pennsylvania Real Estate Investment Trust. And again, like the councilman said, PREIT owns the majority of the mall property. And I also, with us today, is Rich Gottlieb, who's the president and chief operating officer of Keystone. Keystone owns...
We'll get there in a second.
I'll keep talking. Keystone owns the office building that you see prominently standing above the mall. So we're going to touch on a little bit of both. I do think it's important, too, that...
Is that okay?
I think it's important to comment that this meeting is the result of a number of meetings that Councilman Monero mentioned, but also Planning Board and Zoning have seen and heard both Keystone and PREIT over the years talk about the projects that you're going to hear in a minute. And I do have it on boards as a backup.
It's very odd that it's doing that.
The Planning Board, in fact, encouraged collaboration and cooperation between PREIT and Keystone. Just leave it like that, so it's fine.
I'm going to do one more shot. There you go. You got it.
All right, thank you. Apologize for that. We did come 40 minutes early to try it, and again, never goes as planned, so I apologize. Real quick, mall, obviously, the tall building that you see prominently in the back is the Keystone building that I referenced a second ago. So again, we've been collaborating, again, encouraged by my members of council, planning board, zoning board, and really tonight want to present to you the vision for the next piece of evolution at the Plymouth Meeting Mall. The goal here is to take everything that's already been done, the retail, the restaurants, the Whole Foods, the redevelopment of Macy's, the theater, and enhance that so that the mall continues to thrive going forward. In addition, we'll talk about access and circulation that candidly needs some improvements, so we'll touch on some of that. And I think it's important to note that another main benefit to this is increased tax revenue for both the township and for the school board. So just quick context. 20 years in the making here, so we're in obviously 2023. We purchased the property originally in 2003 and has spent approximately $173 million over that period of time to redevelop the pieces that you've seen transformed at the mall to date. A few highlights you can see, obviously, the Whole Foods, the Legoland, Dave & Buster's, and then most recently the Macy's redevelopment. In addition to that, there's a number of other development that's occurred on the periphery, but a significant amount of work has been done to date. But there's more to go. The next kind of phase of evolution is to take and improve the interior of the mall, which candidly has struggled, as well as you can see on your right, the photos of the existing office buildings. The former IKEA office building is located in the large red piece down near the turnpike. And then again, as I referenced, the Keystone building, which is existing today, is in the photo in your bottom right. I put this up to just reinforce that the mall itself and the mall property is a significant contributor to taxes in the township. And those have declined over the last few years as the mall has struggled. The periphery has remained the same and remained stable. And part of what we want to do by redeveloping the residential here, as well as the mall, is to bring that back up. I'm going to talk about a few trends in the industry. Again, the councilman referenced a few of these, but I'll talk about a few trends as well as some other things that have gone on in this area. I don't know if everybody can see this, I apologize, but what it shows is Philadelphia effectively at the center, and these are the malls that are in this surrounding area. So in blue are properties such as King of Prussia, Cherry Hill, Springfield, Lehigh, Deptford Mall in New Jersey, Christiana Mall in Delaware, and Cumberland Mall. Those have all been redeveloped and are primarily still retail. The red, we've got Morristown, Exton, Willow Grove. Those have gone through some evolution or some transformation to mixed use with other uses, other non-retail uses. And then we've got a couple in that yellowish color, Montgomery Mall, Burlington, and Voorhees Town Center, which are at risk. And again, like the councilman said, could trend towards being dead malls over time. A couple quick case studies just for some references, which I think will help in this conversation. The Promenade at Granite Mall, Granite Run rather, was formerly obviously the Granite Run Mall. It's been effectively demalled, so there's not a mall there anymore. Residential on your right is completed, and on the bottom left is under construction. It'll be a total of approximately 400 units when the residential is completed, as well as all the retail that's there. Morristown Mall, which is a Creek property in New Jersey. Analogous in some ways to Plymouth, it's been more of an incremental redevelopment. Movie theater was redone. There was a Macy's here as well, which closed and has been redeveloped. There's a former Sears, which is going to be Cooper University Healthcare, opening later this year. And currently under construction is our 375 apartments up in that top left. And then final example in this area, King of Prussia Town Center. Not formerly a mall, obviously, but I think it's a good example of significant amount of retail surrounded by residential to feed and complement each other. And just two examples of what we want to avoid. You've got Swansea Mall, which is about an hour outside of Boston, which is closed, and Montgomery Mall, not too far from here, which was acquired by an undercapitalized operator and is not going in the right direction. So what's next for the property itself? I'm going to talk a little bit, obviously, about residential, talk about the existing mall, and then connect everything together with some improvements to pedestrian and vehicular connectivity. So first, residential. Again, Keystone is the small red square. The former IKEA is the larger red shape. I think it's important to note Keystone, for their building, has already received conditional use approval for apartments. So there's up to 150 apartments that building can be converted into, and that process is ongoing. Crete is looking for, as the councilman noted, a ground-up project of 300 units. It's also important to note that if the existing building could be redeveloped and transformed into residential, it would be allowed. It's just very challenging and difficult, if not impossible, to do it within that existing building. So, as the councilman mentioned, Crete is looking for new construction of apartments on that piece of property. I think it's also important to note that, probably not a surprise to anybody, but the office market is not good, right, to say the least. And, Rich, you can probably comment better than me. But especially for non-A class or non-trophy office buildings. And no offense to either of these buildings, neither of these come anywhere near being a high-quality office building. So fortunately, the Keystone building lays out in a way that allows it to be converted to residential. And that's what's moving forward. The other building, the former IKEA building, does not. It was a headquarter building, it was purpose-built, it was specific for that use, very challenging to change. Here's some pictures again, touched on this on a couple slides ago, but just to reinforce it. Existing conditions on your right side of both the the former IKEA building as well as the Keystone building. And then what we want to transform it into. So this, on your right side, are renderings of a 300-unit apartment building. Am I blocking? On the left side are a general layout. You see the parking garage, which supports the residential units in there, is wrapped by the apartments, so it will not be seen. It also self-parks, which means all the parking for that is on that piece of property. It does not flow off onto the mall or impact the mall property in any way. You can see a lot of green space, courtyards, dramatically different than what's there today in terms of that office building. Keystone building, again, the building structure remains in place. Interior is gutted and converted, and here's some changes on the outside. I think it's important here as well, not only is the building converted, but there's ground level concrete plazas that exist today. Those are also changed, become more green. There's some amenity space for the residents of the building. And from a parking perspective here as well, residential is less intensive than office, so there's no negative impact to parking at the property. The existing mall. So there have been some successes. The large white space in the center is Legoland. The other large space on the left is the Macy's redevelopment and the Dave & Buster's. But the mall itself on the interior still has challenges. And we're looking to address those through a number of different means. These simply identify larger blocks of space that are available. A couple of the most active conversations now really play off a residential use. So pickleball is obviously very hot right now, very popular. There's an operator that would take 2 levels, 2 of these large spaces. If folks can read it, space H, which is about 22,000 square feet, and then the space below that, which I'll show in a second. There's a spa that's interested in spaces J or I that face out onto the front of the property. Again, those are uses that are synergistic with residential. And bringing residential helps to drive those uses within the mall. And there's, again, additional blocks of space that would be available as the mall itself, the interior of the mall, continues to evolve and transform. This is just the lower level, some exterior renderings. And then as I noted at the beginning, connectivity is important. So any retail project necessitates connectivity, so people can easily get from point A to point B. You can see in the photos on the right, these are existing conditions. There's 6 photos of parking lots that are not the most appetizing, appealing to walk across from point A to point B. So as we're connecting these pieces, as we're improving these pieces, the vision is to transform those into much more pleasant experiences as you go from Whole Foods to the new residential, or Legoland area to the movie theater. Or even, as it shows on the left side, crossing Germantown is a challenge today. The crosswalk is not good. It's difficult to cross that large highway, so there's connectivity that we propose to do there. All this together helps to reinforce, obviously, what's already been successful, helps to drive that more, but also helps when the residential and the other changes on the inside of the mall come to fruition. So not just pedestrian connections, but vehicular connections. Some of this also has been suggested and recommended through planning board and zoning discussions over time. I'll just walk through quickly. One, which is the top right, is the Hickory Road egress. That's a spot that frequently backs up into the ring road, into the mall. And by changing some light functions and putting a green arrow, we can dramatically change that and help that. Number 2, which is the main entrance off of Germantown. That also backs up significantly. So there's improvements there on the site itself, not on Germantown, but on the mall property itself. That will help to facilitate a much easier egress and ingress at that intersection. Number 3, which is what I call the slip entrance right past the loop oil. That can be a challenge, slowing down, leading to cars having to slow down behind it and backs up Germantown. So by transitioning that taper earlier, and allowing people to leave the Germantown traffic flow, get onto the mall quicker. It'll help facilitate and smooth that traffic. And then 4 and 5 are 100% on the site. So for those of you who kind of make that turn past Whole Foods down towards the parking garage and ultimately towards the theater, there's a few turns that are a little tighter. So again, we're going to facilitate a smoother transition through there in conjunction with the residential to make that flow a lot simpler. And that's all part of the phase 1, as we're calling it, with the residential. So this work here, from a traffic perspective, and a lot of the stuff on the prior slide from a pedestrian perspective, would be incorporated and executed when the residential is completed, or while the residential is being completed. So, final slide. Again, I apologize to folks in the back, but this shows all the connections, pedestrian, vehicular, the improvements, as well as the new residential, incorporation of the new residential. So with that, happy to answer any questions from council members and obviously from the audience.
Yeah, thank you guys very much. Appreciate it. I think what we want to do is stick to my guns here on this one. Is we want to get our questions submitted in writing. So if you want to just take a minute, if anybody would like to grab index cards, we'll come around and collect them. There's pens over there. Pens are on the house. If I thought to ask Phil Brady, I would have gotten our new community sense pen. If you're a resident, please take a white card. If you're a non-resident, you can take the multicolored cards. We want to make sure we answer resident questions first, but hopefully get a chance to answer them all. And it could just be a comment as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be a question. I'll give you a couple minutes. We'll come around and collect any cards you have right here. Just give us a wave and we'll come and take it. Anybody else? I don't need to rush in. I may start asking here while you're writing, so I'll have our council members continue to come around and grab I would like to start getting to the questions, so again, so we can try to stay on time here. And again, if there's others that come up, we'll continue to come around and grab them from you. And again, we'll try our best. There may be some questions that we can't answer tonight, and we'll certainly keep these and try to get any information out to you, via our different channels, social media, email, internet, that kind of thing, if you have questions we couldn't answer tonight. So our first one is not really a question, it's a comment with 2 exclamation points. It says, please just keep the carousel. So we'll make sure that's noted. Question here, is Preet planning to keep the apartment project or sell it, and if sell it, to whom?
The plan would be to work with somebody, to partner with somebody to redevelop that. And there's no one identified at this point.
What is the projected tax revenue, I guess, from the plan you showed? I think there was a slide.
Yeah, go back. Bear with me. All right. I'll answer that in 1 second, Councilman. This slide itself shows the decrease. 2016 is the bottom, 2022 is the top. It would remain consistent if 2023 was updated yet. But the tax revenue for the mall parcel itself has declined over that time from 1.4 million to 574,000. The projected revenue from the 2 apartment buildings, so Keystones and Preet's, is about $850,000 of net benefit to both the school district and the township. And just to be clear, that takes into account that there's some tax already paid, obviously. So that $850 is the incremental additional tax that will be generated.
One of the
This slide itself does not show the incremental revenue, the new revenue. This only shows the decline. I can certainly go around, but
Maybe say which color line means what.
all right. So the red. Well, I don't know what colors you can all see back there, but it's supposed to be green and red. So the green is the post-appeal tax number, and I'll explain that in a second. The red is the pre-appeal. So if you look at 2016, 17, and 18, they're even. The lines match up. There was subsequently for these years a tax appeal that led to a reduction in the taxes paid for the mall. So the red is the pre-appeal number, and the green is the post-appeal number, which obviously declined.
What are they in 23?
23, they're about the same. They're about $580,000.
Incremental would be,
The incremental will be $850,000 on top of the 575, 580. So the quick math is $1.3 million.
One of the things that I would say is part of this project, but really in many places in the township, not just our township, but communities around, we talked about the changing nature of real estate. And I think we all know that, just go on Zillow, like the residential real estate market is red hot. It's hard to get anything. Nothing's for sale. Everything that goes for sale is, if it's priced reasonably, it's gone tomorrow. But as we mentioned earlier, the office, commercial is different. And the pandemic changed a lot of things. We have a lot of office space in Plymouth Township. We have been sitting here every month at our meetings going through tax assessment appeals, where typically we're losing revenue and paying back overpaid taxes. And it's things change and things can certainly come and go. But one of the things we want to make sure, and again, I want to specify that I'm not just talking about this property here, but our township in general, is we don't want empty buildings. Because empty buildings don't really benefit anybody. We know that we try to keep our residential real estate tax rates here in the township very low. We have some of the lowest around for some of the most services that we provide. And the need to sort of think of it with an open mind and continue to look at the landscape of the township and how best to use our properties. We always have to make sure that we're not allowing things to just fall apart and remain empty. So, we see some of that here that's been here for years, but we know that that's happening in a lot of communities around us as well. The next question is why apartments and not condos? And the comment that people tend to feel more pride or ownership when they own.
I think both are technically opportunities, but from an apartment perspective, it's Keystone's an operator owns the building now, operates apartments and office buildings, and their intention is to hold and maintain that as a rental property. From Preet's perspective, our goal as well is to maintain some control, some piece of that process, so that it's integral to the whole project itself. So rental is the preferred path for both of the properties.
There's a question, I think there's a slide up here that might show some of this. It's a question about how traffic will be handled, what changes will be made for a more even flow of traffic in an already congested area.
Sure. And I have some blow-ups of that traffic slide that'll probably at least help a little bit. So I'll go to the blow-ups in a second, but this is the larger plan just for context. And I'll walk you through each of the 5 pieces. Seth, do you mind switching? So first one, Hickory Road. Again, this is the same slide I showed earlier, but this will break it into a couple so it's a little easier to tell. Hickory Road here. Again, if you go there today, tends to back up on the left turn out as people are trying to come across from the opposite side, and sometimes backs up even into the ring road of the mall. So with simple signal changes, so having a left green arrow that will allow traffic to egress before the cars come across the street, that'll help to alleviate that in a significant way. Here, which is the Germantown entrance, today, this area here tends to back up quite a bit, especially at busy times. So the change here will be, instead of coming in off of Germantown and being able to turn left or right, you're only going to be able to go right. That left movement's going to be blocked, and that will facilitate egress from this way and this way out onto Germantown in a much quicker and efficient manner. At 3, this is the Luke Oil here, just for orientation. This is that slip ingress that I mentioned. This yellow is the new orientation. So you can see it's tapered more, it's a little bit wider, and it takes the traffic that's coming up Germantown, which today backs up, when someone is slowing down to make that turn, and it'll help reduce that backup because people will be able to get off quicker and in a more smooth manner than they can today. On the site itself, there's some simple reorientation here that takes what's a relatively dramatic turn as you go down towards the IKEA building and the Whole Foods garage. Smooths that, makes it an easier transition. And then the fifth one, also on site, this takes into account the new apartment building, but shows improvements to this circulation. Today you come in and effectively dead ends here. There's a concrete median, so you cannot go straight through there. This will be a four-way stop intersection and allow for traffic to flow in a more smooth manner.
Sort of a related question, kind of a comment about the existing condition of the ring road, and a question about what will be done to maintain or repair the existing ring road, just in terms of road conditions.
Yeah, it's a good question. As you saw, what I just walked through, several of the locations around that ring road get improved through this project. So that would be facilitated as part of it.
We have an overall.
Yeah, that's it.
This one's a suggestion. There's a suggestion here to consider buying property behind the mattress store for a slip ramp from Plymouth Road. Always $1 million question here, and this is a tough question to answer. It probably is a bigger context of where things stand right now and where this process is, but sort of a general time frame question about, from Creed's standpoint, when they would like to see some of these changes finished by.
Yesterday.
I feel like it
Not
was
to be
longer ago
too-
than that.
No, in all seriousness, as soon as possible. I mean, I think it's important. I tried to touch on this earlier by showing some other examples, and Councilman Manera mentioned this at the beginning. This is going on all over the country, not just in our region, but all over the country. I worked with Creed on a couple projects down outside of Washington, D.C. We got 450 units approved. We're working on another one for 500 units. All over the country, and I've been to many different spots, many different properties. This is the next evolution of a mall. So to answer your question, as soon as possible. We would like to move it forward. I know Keystone is already a little bit ahead of us and has similar plans, but quickly.
Sure.
Just a point of clarification, you mentioned sort of your desired state would be to move forward quickly. In your presentation, you mentioned phase one would include the residential, the access, the connectivity. What about some of the changes you mentioned to the interior of the mall? Is the timing for that in sync with or separate?
Ideally, it would be in sync. I do think it's important that some of it is a little chicken or egg. So, the spa concept I mentioned, pickleball, some of the others, they can move on their own path and can move concurrently. With the residential, I think they move quicker. So that helps to facilitate that in a quicker manner.
I think I can answer this. If the apartments are currently not permitted at the old IKEA, are there plans to demolish the building? And that is sort of what we're talking about here, that would be beyond what's currently permitted, is the building to be demolished and the residential to be built from the ground up where the old IKEA building currently is.
That would be the plan, yes.
Where does the church feature in these plans? As far as I know, there is no change to the
No.
church on the wall.
No change to the church anymore.
A request here to explain again how the interior of the mall will change. Will current stores in there be retained? Will there be an addition beyond maybe what you talked about? Any addition to it? I think you talked about pickleball. You talked about the spa concept. So I guess just general questions about anything else on the interior.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to show two things just for some quick context, and then I think it's important, and we've touched on this. Retail across the country has changed dramatically, and you can see by this slide again. I apologize; some folks in the back may not be able to see it totally clearly, but we're surrounded by pretty strong retail centers. King of Prussia being one of the best in the country, right down the road. So from a lot of the traditional retail tenants, they're going to be in some of these other centers. So to answer the question directly, the pickleball, uses like Lego, like Dave and Buster's, entertainment, spa, which is catering to future residents, but also people in the community, will be further enhanced. The church, for that matter, will be, continue to be a big piece of the project. There will be retail. It'll just be, in a different form, and will continue to evolve as this moves forward.
Relative question here. Have you considered keeping the Macy's redevelopment area, keeping Boscov's as it is? And you guys do not, point of clarity, Crete does not own Boscov's. That is a separate owner, correct?
Crete owns it, but it's a lease.
Yeah. Long term, very long term.
That's what.
So has there been consideration of keeping the Macy's, keeping the Boscov's Legoland, and actually tearing down the interior, replacing it with open air shopping? Has that ever been, I guess the question is, has that ever been explored?
I would answer it this way. Everything has been explored. Many things have been explored over time. That's not the current path that we plan to pursue.
And there's a request for a roller skating rink on that. I think I held a girl's hand for the first time at a roller skating rink.
Or part of the mall?
Good question. No, part of the mall.
Part of the mall.
Next one is just a comment. This person says, I love the mixed-use concept. We need a town center. Question about sort of the apartments themselves. What would be the intended price range of the residential use? And general concern from this resident about the lack of housing that's affordable in our region. Has there been any consideration to affordable housing?
So I can speak for the pre-piece. We've not priced them at this point because it's so early in the process. Rich, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I don't know if you want to comment on
It's
price.
market rate housing with the market for bear community. So it's very expensive to develop today, so it's hard to have a lower price point in general because of all the expenses to go through.
And I can add that, and this question itself is probably a question for a whole nother one of these meetings. We are a council that is very aware of the issue of housing prices, and there's a lot of terminology that can be used these days. There's workforce housing, affordable housing, and there's a lot of really innovative concepts out there for how to blend that in to the existing character of the community. It's something that we are studying. It's something that we are very aware of, that we are having conversations about in the township in general. So I think that's something you'll hear more about to come, not necessarily just here, but perhaps in some other places. I was interested to hear that office buildings tend to require more significant parking than residential. Can you elaborate just a little more specifically about the amount of parking and traffic generated from office versus previous office, I guess, to what would be new residential?
So let me add one thing. There's been significant testimony at zoning board over time for both Keystone's project and Crete's project that has gone through a lot of these details, a lot of these numbers. I can talk some general numbers. If you bear with me a second. I'm going to read a couple things just to put it in some context. So there's currently 757,000 square feet of retail space at the moment. That requires 3,786 parking spaces per the code in Plymouth Township. The Keystone building itself will require less than half of the parking that the existing office building requires. So based on parking ratios that the township code requires, the Keystone building itself as residential is about half of what it would be if it was office. The Crete building self-parks. And again, bear with me. Again, Keystone building is here. This is the IKEA parcel, and that parcel itself, that residential building, will have a parking garage that's sufficiently parked for the residential units. So this will not have any negative impact on the parking that exists on the rest of the mall.
If I may, just more specifically, the typical office parking ratio is about 4 parking spaces needed per 1,000 square feet of rental space. A residential unit, average here is about 950 square feet. It probably only requires 1.5, even less parking spaces. So that's the difference right there.
Question here, would Keystone compete with Preet for the same apartment tenants? So I guess the question would be, would these two buildings be in competition with one another?
Rich, I'll let you,
Yes, but we're looking at it doing a high-rise, so we will differentiate ourselves. They'll do more garden style, low-rise property will be a high-rise property. But I think that having more actually makes it a better location for everybody. Brings some mass and economies to everybody that this is a place that you would want to live. And you're not one building on the island.
Are there any more restaurant pads being contemplated? Anything that would be in a master plan for the mall?
there's none right now.
Yes, there's actually one pad for next to the Shake Shack that's being contemplated right now.
That's under construction.
Another one for Honey.
Will there be any change in the overall permeable surface from what's there currently, or impermeable?
It would be reduced, slightly, but it would be reduced between what's happening here. And actually, let me flip to another slide. Thank you.
Let's do that.
The quick answer is yes, but I'll just point out a couple of key pieces. So, as I mentioned, and again, I apologize, it's hard to see on here. If anyone wants to at the end, can go look over here. Around the Keystone building, there's a significant amount of concrete that becomes, a big chunk of it is green. All these connections here, and up here transform, as I showed some of those earlier pictures, of asphalt to, green space, trees. And then again, around the apartment building here, which is primarily concrete, asphalt, would be green.
And just I think I know the answer to this, but just for everybody here, the sort of purple shaded areas on there would be what you would kind of currently classify as underutilized parking areas.
That's exactly
Would
right.
there be any potential to add any additional green space in any of those, perhaps?
There's a few spots that we do show more connection, like walkways and pathways as well as trees. The balance is, back to the parking question a few minutes ago, the balance is making sure there's enough parking remaining for the tenant requirements and the code requirements.
I think this question is referring to the two residential buildings. Aside from the apartments, is there any potential for increased leased square footage beyond just the apartments? I guess meaning like commercial or office or restaurant within those buildings.
There's not a plan for more square footage. There's a plan, as I showed, flip to the one that shows the interior blocks. There's a plan to combine some spaces. I mentioned a couple options, but it's not more space.
Not within the apartment buildings themselves.
Oh, I understand. I'm sorry.
I don't.
Yeah, no, that's correct.
For the person that asked that question, I don't want to call you on the spot. Is that what you meant?
My question was, and I wrote this down too, for example, there's purple underutilized parking spaces. Is there potential in the future to build more?
There would be potential, and if you look around again at other examples, there is, continued densification does occur. It would take a reduction in parking ratios that is heavily guided by the township, for one thing, and also a lot of the tenants have requirements for, a certain amount of parking. So those two factors kind of keep it at what we've looked at.
So the township would have to approve.
I
think ultimately, if this is successful, those spaces aren't underutilized.
That's a good answer.
I think you've touched on some of this, but the question asks, is there any thoughts to a more integrated plan that blends the retail, the commercial, and the residential? I'm not 100% sure what you mean by that. But.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I don't want to read into the question too much, but if you look at, this slide in particular as an example, the Keystone building sits right here. So the residential from Keystone is highly integrated into the property already. Seth, can you go to the master plan? Even some of these, there we go, perfect. And although it seems far away, the only thing that separates the Whole Foods from the residential here is this ring road. So this is very close, very connected to here. It's not literally on top of it, obviously, but I do think with the proximity of the two buildings to everything that's already there and all these other improvements from a pedestrian standpoint, it will help to integrate the project better.
I think that was your question too. Did I ask that correctly? I can tell by the handwriting.
It was my question. I was just thinking, we're putting an apartment building and some landscaping. So is there kind of more ways to blend this?
That is a big goal, and again, hard to see probably, but it is a significant goal of all these arrows that are going in the various directions to, let me flip back to the slide.
I didn't realize I was asking a confusing question.
No, actually, I wanted to clarify that I asked it correctly.
It's a great question, and I think it's important to spend a minute or two. All the pictures on the right are,
You'll notice that that's one of the slides we have going out here.
we do have a
It's
few.
very, it actually is a very important piece.
So envision the asphalt parking lots, no trees, not very friendly to walk between point A and point B. Even you might see people drive from one side of the mall to the other. These are just examples of what can be done and what should be done and what would be done as it relates to connecting the different pieces. So changing, as an example, Legoland is here, AMC Movie Theater here, Keystone is here. Having a straight shot that's a more pleasant walkway, trees, lighted, well lit, and landscaped to make that connection between those spots. Same here.
Pedestrian connection from Whole Foods to the apartment building straight through to the plaza in the mall.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, just in case folks didn't hear what Joe said, this arrow here following from the apartment building, straight up in front of Whole Foods, across this plaza, through the mall, and out to the opposite side. So all that connection to push people and encourage people to walk through.
There have been a few questions that mentioned the idea of a town center, and I think that comes up a lot. And I don't want to speak for everybody else, but we see a lot of potential for that theme here, and we wanted to make sure that whatever we saw tonight included that connectivity, because the town center is connected. People can walk from place to place. So I did really want to stress the importance of that question. A comment: I'm in support of the project. I'm excited for the way it will revitalize the mall area and positively impact tax revenue. Who are you targeting for the residences? Would it be young professionals, older retirees? And then a side note, why not develop a rooftop dining area at Miller's like there is at Whole Foods? If you want to answer the first question first.
Rich, you want to talk about your building first?
So, our building, we target young professionals and empty nesters. We're expecting empty nesters. We went a little bigger on our units because we're looking for empty nesters who have a lot of stuff that we can shrink down a little bit. We've actually looked at the rooftop. Doesn't really work for our building. Between what's up there and the load, and we have antennas up there that are a problem for people. So I'd love to do that, but I don't think we're going to be able to make that.
It'd be similar for the people and similar target tenants.
And I guess just for that second part, and has there ever been any consideration to any of those existing rooftop areas of Miller's, buildings next to Whole Foods, any vertical development?
We can certainly look into it.
Next question, just more of a comment, voicing my support for the project. The worst thing we could do for our community is to have a dead mall in the middle of our town. The apartments bring increased tax dollars and amenities to the region. Frida's done a great job reactivating the former Macy's. Another question about demographics. Will there be a dog park?
Seth, is there, go ahead.
We're gonna have a dog run as part of our outdoor amenity package for everybody.
And my guess, we've done thousands of these units and hundreds of these buildings now. They all have friendly, they all have dog runs associated with them.
Really important question here, and kind of in a different angle. A request to discuss the impact on infrastructure and sort of a few bullet points: sewer, electric, water, rainwater runoff, and potential increase in students for school. So we want to talk about maybe the infrastructure of like sewer, electric, water first.
Sure. So sewer, I mentioned a number of hearings, and I mentioned the conditional use that Keystone's already received. Sewer will have to be worked through in order for either of these projects to move forward. Right now, there's conversations with both Crete, Keystone, and the township engineers in terms of that exact piece, sewer, and how to resolve it. There's been some good progress recently, but I think it is important to note that in order for these to move forward, that has to be worked out. It's even a condition of the approvals for the Keystone building. Electric and water, we're not aware of any issues. This mall has significant power infrastructure, water service. We've looked at the ability to add this. There's not a concern there for either party.
Stormwater runoff.
Stormwater, again, will have to go through the typical process with the state DEP. To your question earlier, there is a reduction in paved or impervious space and pervious increases, but that will have to be mitigated through the process as well.
And then potential impact on school-age student population.
Yeah, bear with me. Go ahead.
So we've dealt with this question.
I should just
before.
really quickly point out, Rich Gottlieb from Keystone and Joe Cordino from Crete are in the front row. They've spoken a few times, so I just want you to know
Sorry.
who's
We, as part of the approvals that we received, we're only allowed to have 1 and 2 bedroom units. We expect young professionals to receive strollers, but I don't think much past a stroller we're going to see someone raising a family in that location. And so that's really how we're working right now. We don't see school-age students other than typical a bit of divorcee whose students already in the system already, and maybe that's the second location for one parent, things like that. But we don't really, we've done studies to show that it really doesn't increase, these type of apartments do not increase very much any type of school. There's something, it's not the very big. We have done studies that go through the whole region and have actual numbers we actually presented. But you really, the truth is, you can rent a house, single family house for less than you can rent an apartment. So we just haven't. I know it's a concern, and that it's a valid concern, but it's honestly
No, not. That was a question about affordable housing in general, and I think that what we said is that's a bigger conversation we're having, but not necessarily related to this project. A suggestion comment here: take the IKEA site, make it a high-end hotel convention center, which would be highly visible from the turnpike. The noise from the turnpike could detract potential apartment renters. In an area that is already congested at most of the day, and especially at morning and afternoon peak hours, how would your plan help to control and not exacerbate the problem? I live in the development across the street from the mall. It takes me sometimes more than 5 minutes just to get out onto Germantown Pike.
That's a good question. So, again, through the process of hearings that have occurred, zoning, both for Keystone and Free, there's been significant testimony given by traffic professionals throughout many meetings. As I mentioned earlier, as it relates to parking, the impact for residential at peak hours is less than office. So, the Keystone building as a specific first, and we'll get to the other one in a second, but there's a reduction in traffic that has been testified in front of the zoning board as it relates to Keystone at those peak times. In addition, the 300-unit apartment building has had the same studies done, the same analysis done, and those peak hour traffic numbers are lower than what it is today, what it is as an office building effectively. So that office building could be refilled as office. You take that, compare it, it's a lower number at those peak times.
And I would add to that, if you look at traffic that are going on through the fact that the mall is fully occupied by 15, 16, our traffic, even with the additional residential cars on Keystone, does not rise up to that level by any means. So the traffic, I agree, the traffic conditions are always there. Doing some road design, trying to exacerbate traffic. But I can assure you one thing, it's not coming from the mall. We have a lot less traffic coming from the mall, a lot less customers, unfortunately, coming to the mall than we had when it's peak operating time.
And I think, and something I've said on council for years is, we certainly see more traffic. I mean, anybody who lives here knows that there's more traffic on that Germantown Pike corridor than there was 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. The development between the Turnpike to East Norton to Collegeville to skip back to beyond is more than it used to be. And that's a challenge. The challenge is that we are a major pass-through community. But how do we balance that with making sure that we don't have these empty buildings and try to get at least maybe the traffic going in this area to be of benefit to us in some way. So that is certainly a challenge and something that we take into a lot of consideration.
Chris,
Yes.
that was my question, and yes, I understand what you're saying, sir, but I'm talking about 10 o'clock in the morning when I'm sitting at a light for 5 minutes, 2 cars go by, I go through the light, I'm the third car, so that's another 5 minutes or so, and so we're not talking necessarily about just the traffic coming from the mall, which is the overall picture. And that's something that, of course, there are 250 homes in that development across from the mall. And there are 2 ways to get out of that development, onto Red Road and to Johnson Highway and onto Germantown Pike. And that is really a significant concern for those of us who live in that development, because if one of those exits or entrances is blocked, how do we get out in the case of an emergency? And so that's something that I think I would like us to hear a little bit more about, not just the changes in the mall, which may be a good thing overall, but the impact in that whole surrounding area for those of us who have a large investment in our properties there. And
I
the
think
taxpayers for a long time.
And I think 2 points to your point. I guess one goal with what's developed at the mall is to try to get more of that traffic outside of that main intersection at Germantown Pike and get some of that traffic onto Hickory Road, get some of that traffic to the lesser utilized points. But I think bigger picture, and look, this may be a hope and not necessarily reality, but the regional traffic is it's all regional planning. And Germantown Pike being a PennDOT road, there's been some improvements on Germantown Pike over the years. I think there's hope that things such as the Ridge Pike project could potentially help to alleviate some of the Germantown Pike traffic as that road gets improved. Your question is a super important question with a lot of probably really complicated solutions or answers, short-term and long-term. And I guess what we would like to see with CREAT is that they could help with some of the short-term to sort of make more of a positive impact, less of a negative impact, but then bigger conversations with PennDOT, with the county, with other transportation structures.
And just another point, not on traffic, but when there were all those changes in the mall and a lot of the water runoff became a problem, there were floods in our neighborhood when we had the 2-3 inches at a time because the runoff wasn't controlled well. And so I really, as people who have lived through that, and where I live, it was right at the beginning of that development. So my property and my neighbor's property are mostly affected because there's no place when that water comes off the mall. There's really very little place for it to drain to before it gets to Plymouth Creek.
And again, I guess any development that we see at the mall will have to go through all of our stormwater management, all of our PSF, and hopefully maybe, again, I'm not saying this in but maybe some of the increase in the permeable surfaces here could actually be a positive in this type of development. Maybe. This is sort of, again, a related question. Improving the two main entrances is good, but as mentioned, those can also back up significantly. How would they handle the vehicles from 450 more households? I think we sort of just discussed them all. That wasn't the same question I just read. Get it done, exclamation point, already too long of a delay. I assume residents worry more of the negative than they do about the benefit. It will be a domino knockdown effect. If the mall goes, hotel accepts, everything else will go. So sort of, I guess, just stressing the positive impact of a thriving development here and the dangers of what happens if nothing happens. Question about safety measures planned on Germantown Pike. I think we sort of alluded to some of that. Any talk about pedestrian safety access changes between Germantown Pike, the neighborhood across the street? We know a lot of employees from the mall probably walk across that street, or even residents walk across that street. Any consideration?
Yeah, and again, if folks can see this is the opposite side of Germantown. This is the mall side, obviously. There is a crosswalk there today, but if anyone's ever used it, it's barely visible. Basically, two white lines. It's very poorly marked, and you're crossing, effectively 7 to 8 lanes of traffic, depending on where you cross. So our plan would be to work with PennDOT and the township to improve that crosswalk and improve the opposite side in a small area, because it's right on the corner there, but to improve that so that it's a more functional, usable crosswalk than it's there today.
Kind of a general question about the current success. Is Burlington Coat Factory and Boscov's currently successful?
They are.
Probably best to address that. All the stores that face the exterior of this property are high performers. I'm literally high performers. One of that Boscov's top stores. Burlington does well. Surprisingly, Dick's Sporting is actually performing better here than they did in Metroplex. We moved them over. So again, all of the exterior stores, even talk about the restaurants, Firebirds, and the Miller's Ale House performed extremely well. So again, from a retailer performance perspective, if you face the exterior, and if you have an exterior entrance, they tend to perform well. And the test is, they've been here, they stay here. We haven't seen a lot of turnover in these retailers that face the exterior. The challenge is that interior restoration. Someone raised the question, I answered an earlier question, someone raised the question about making this open air demolished. One of the biggest problems with redeveloping to open air is you open up on 2 different levels. If you think about it. You enter the mall on one side, on the lower level, and the other side on the upper level. elevation change really precludes turning into a center. By the way, we'd love to do it, assuming the numbers work, which is a whole other issue, but the configuration of the site really precludes one from going into it. We're trying to get as close as we can to it, by many of the restaurants, et cetera, opening into the outside, or the basic space opening into the outside. But it presents a challenge ultimately. Things like pickleball, spas, things of that sort can exist with a team entrance, which is why they remain part of the solution.
Yes.
You want me to?
No, I'm sorry. Just follow-up question.
I can't hear you. Pardon?
Just for the benefit of everyone, I don't want to cut you off. I think there's a question, and this is one that we read a lot about, and we hear a lot about. Is this idea of the mall sort of being cut off? As you know, wouldn't it be great if there was a restaurant inside, so you walk in and you walk past 10 stores to get to the restaurant? And I think we talked a little bit about the changing nature. I think that's one of the changing natures of a lot of this retail is that, and you see it around a lot. We always see, why would somebody go build a brand new building for their restaurant or store when there's 10 vacant buildings right across the street? And it just, again, is one of those trends in business where they want those self-standing, close to the road, visible from the road. And that's sort of a trend that may be out of our control at this point. But, certainly probably one of the reasons why the mall itself doesn't get foot traffic is because you don't have to go through it. And that's definitely a concern. There's a question about King of Prussia and a comparison. Would this be something that would look like the town center in King of Prussia, and there's a concern that the parking lot there is inadequate and difficult to navigate. So can you maybe compare and contrast this compared to that?
I think it's a good question. Town center is much denser than what we envision here. So we're talking about 450 units. There's 2,250 units at King of Prussia Town Center. So 5 times as many units. The way that their buildings are oriented with the on-street parking right in front is much different than what you see here. So I would not, that's not a concern of ours as it relates to what we're doing here.
Can you talk about how apartments co-located with shopping could potentially reduce traffic outside of the mall property?
Yes, another good question, good comment. Through all those studies that we've referenced on the traffic side, there is a reduction of traffic outside the property. So if you live in one of the units, you're going to walk to Whole Foods. If you lived across the street, you would have driven. Simple example. Same with every other piece on the property. And it ends up being a couple percentage points. So it's not a massive number, but it's a real number that reduces traffic because people circulate within the mall. And the reason we're talking about all this connectivity is to encourage that further. So that if you live there, when you live there, you walk to these different spaces, you're not driving.
Good question here. The garage under Whole Foods is currently underutilized. How would that be affected? And maybe just any general comments about that area of parking?
Yep, it's a good question as well. I brought this back up because a couple things. One of the improvements, that number 5 improvement, let me go to the bigger one. Here you go. I talked about the ring road kind of being smooth. I talked about that intersection being modified. But there's also additional signage and lighting that's going to be part of that so that it's more visible. It's easier to know it's there. Unless you go past it on a regular basis, you may not even know it's there. So part of it is signage, wayfinding for, again, the vehicles as well as pedestrians to drive people to that garage.
Will the apartments have locked entrances? I guess meaning so that only residents can enter the buildings. Yes.
Yeah.
There's a question here, probably more for us, not necessarily we can give a clear answer right now, but will there be more police in the area for protection of residents? That's probably a question in terms of how, increased or changes like this would impact police protection. Probably something we can maybe get back to you with a more detailed answer. Certainly challenges in commercial areas of our township for the need for police protection as well. So you could kind of see maybe a little bit of a different need, but something that we can answer better in more detail. This is a question about the portion of the residential designated. Well, we already talked about that, so we'll put that aside for now. Given Preet's current financial condition, do you think that this project could be completed?
Yeah, I think this project, stands on its own, certainly be completed. We're expecting to work out our existing debt situation by the end of the year, and this project is, something that has a great future, and we think will be highly profitable.
The mall has gone through several changes in the past. Have you looked back at any of those for ideas?
So, you saw the kind of quick evolution at the very beginning. Rich told me to cut out a bunch of slides, rightfully so. We had like a kind of build-up of evolution of the redevelopment of the property over the 20 years. But the quick answer is yes. We've looked to see what's been successful and enhance that.
This place was open, that place was open in the mid-60s.
I understand. I was only referencing from 2003 when Preet took
They had
it.
a fire, several different changes. I don't remember all the different changes from
The quick answer is yes. We've looked at past success to try to continue.
I know that the idea of the potential tenant of pickleball is kind of a possible conceptual thing that there's a question about would bocce courts be considered, and obviously very popular in the community. But I guess just to clarify, the potential pickleball tenant would be a privately operated sort of pickleball club, correct?
That's exactly correct. That's right.
So it probably couldn't really speak to whatever else they might offer, or
That's right. Yeah.
again, a suggestion. How about some form of entertainment, comedy club, a playhouse for concerts or plays, roller rink, ice skating rink, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that Preet's probably heard those suggestions before. I know that you guys have looked at all sorts of things in there in the past. I guess in a general question, what level of consideration has entertainment as a concept been looked at here at the mall?
When you say entertainment, you're talking about live entertainment?
Well, that's what, this person, comedy clubs, playhouse, roller rink, ice skating, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Bocce was an operator who tried doing bar with Bocce. And it's not worked out successfully, but we have that discussion over the years. In terms of entertainment, we went out to LA for the comedy clubs, so we're putting it in here. It just hasn't been viable. And this property is a property that it's a tremendous competitive threat. No question about it. And all of the uses, actually, we tried to put an ice rink in the middle of the mall. Plans on an ice rink in the middle of the property. We've looked at numerous scenarios where we could build entertainment, all different kinds of things. And I think where we are right now is we have something that we think works, makes it viable, and brings the tax returns to tax base. If you think about the apartments that we're both doing, you add them together, you really come back to the previous taxes developed, and you can grow from there. So I think where we are right now, we believe is viable, and for this was not a suggestion you came up with, and I appreciate all the suggestions. There's not one you came up with that you thought had been tried and worked on something for real.
Yes.
The sleeper ball and all these things, is that going to be inside of the mall?
Yes.
Okay. I have the bungee jump trampoline inside the mall, a small business owner in there. I live in town center in King of Prussia, and I love the concept that they have. Right? It's a great place to be, and you can walk, and it's great entertainment. My question is, are we going to be allowed to stay in?
Are you going to be allowed to stay in the mall?
Yeah.
Yeah, the intent would be that, yeah.
Okay. Because Legoland is not going to go anywhere, right? I came here in 2000 in Florida, and we opened up, and the mall was really, really quiet, and people started reacting to it. They came, they started coming back, and now we have an arcade, and now it's more kid-friendly, and I guess what's our future going to be? Is my question.
Yeah, the future would be hopefully better, right? So
I hope so.
You've got residents that live there
Yeah.
and can walk there, and you've got others that vitality within the mall, pickleball, spa, et cetera. They only help. You're good.
There's a question about whether
Good, thank you.
whether consideration has been given to a 55-plus community. The fact that it could alleviate some of the traffic concerns because more seniors are less likely to drive. Boscov's in Burlington are already appealing to seniors, and there could be less crime concerns. So has there been any conversation? And I think we've answered somewhat already, but about specifically to marketing to 55 plus.
These, again, Rich answered before, but the pre-preference here would be market rate, would not be age restricted.
The repositioning of the interior mall presented is inconsistent with how it's currently being marketed as a space for life science. If you're unable to reposition the space, what are your alternative plans?
You said the pickleball, the spa takes up a significant amount of space, and we would continue to say unable to, we tend to driven, it will take time to fulfill the balance of space is something that we're committed to.
Anyone that didn't get to pass in a question that still has the card? So we're getting close to 8:30, which is the deadline. We're right on time. If I could just say a couple things, from our perspective here. This has been I've been on Plymouth Council for 8 years, and I've been in many meetings, and we've seen a lot of different ideas. And at the end of the day, 8 years have gone by, and the empty building is still there. And as I mentioned before, I think it's our goal as a township to make sure that we're constantly evolving and making sure that our township and our community is thriving. And if we live in a location that we do, that's desirable for people to live, desirable for business, desirable for all sorts of uses, we want to try to make sure that we're capitalizing and maximizing those opportunities. At the same time, we always are here first and foremost to serve the needs of our residents. And projects like this combine the needs of existing residents with the potential for growth for future residents. And we're always looking at a way to make sure those things are balanced. We have zoning codes in place, and they allow certain things to be built in certain places. And many of those have been in place for generations. Occasionally, we need to revisit some of that, and we need to say, what might be more modern, what might be more adequate to what people need or to what works for today. So this process that we're in right now is a process to try to make sure that we're doing what's right for the township, what's best for our taxpayers, what's best for our residents, but at the same time, Preet and all the different parcel owners here at the mall are also part of our business community. And if we can continue to try to find ways to work together, to find solutions that work for us, that work for them, that work for our residents, that's what we're here for, and that's what sort of is the goal of meetings like this. There's always going to be pieces of projects that we'd love to have that we couldn't have. There's always going to be visions that are great on paper but don't end up working out. But I think that the purpose here, and hopefully, the goal at the end is to try to find something that helps move our township forward in a positive way. There's going to certainly be probably other questions that come up. There may be things that you did not get a chance to ask tonight that you think about later. Certainly all of us on council we're welcome for your questions via email, phone call, reaching out to the township website, whatever's easiest for you as we continue this process. And as things come up, we certainly want to make sure that we get that communication out to everybody as well. So I know just on behalf of my fellow members of council, I'd really like to thank everybody for coming. This is a great turnout, and I think really good questions, really good feedback from you, and hopefully an opportunity for you to at least see what some of the thoughts are on the table. And if any of you guys want to have any final comments or any thoughts, and I would say too, if there's any additional things that you kind of wanted to ask, that you just thought about, we'll stick around for a couple minutes if you want to come up and ask us on your way out.
Yeah, I would echo what the councilman just said. We really appreciate the opportunity. We appreciate the turnout. Appreciate all the members of council for giving us this chance to talk about it. And we really look forward to moving it forward.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.